Well, Darrin, for WWE fans who wanted things to move along in this Bloodline storyline, we got some movement tonight, some major segments. Jumping right to the end, Roman Reigns stood in solidarity, loose solidarity perhaps, with Sami Zayn, Jimmy, and Jey Uso as the show ended. A lot led up to that on this week's show. Before I recap more particulars, just I want to get your thoughts on the journey they took us on this show, and if it felt true to the pace and the story that they told leading into this show in terms of in particular the path Roman Reigns has been on in order to believably turn babyface, but not betray who we've come to know him as before his time off, and use Sami as the major player in convincing, manipulating, inspiring Roman to trust him and unite.
Yeah, Roman has stayed true to his character and hasn't betrayed what he's been doing the last few years and has been staying consistent. So I will give them credit for that, and a great use of Sami to integrate him into storylines to, well, I guess Roman didn't apologize, but kind of did a little bit, but kind of backtracked on it. But he has stayed true to his character. Yeah. The first thing that entered my mind was the little tease at the end where you knew where it was going. But I thought the most intriguing thing could have been for Sami to join the new Bloodline. And it's not like that would have been out of left field, like a Russo swerve or anything like that. There are some logical reasons why he would have done that, including Roman kind of just brushing him off in the opening segment. So it would have made sense, and I actually would have preferred that direction. But logically, what happened at the end was what should have happened to go ahead and tell that story. And just as we often say, sometimes just because it's a logical conclusion doesn't mean that you shouldn't just be swerving people just for the sake of doing that. So it was a satisfying ending.
Yeah, I like the way they told the story and what the story was. Sami believably talked nostalgically about the good times that they had. Roman believably wasn't willing to just embrace all of that. And what they effectively did is they built up this desire among fans to see something that felt like it was going to be a struggle to get. It didn't come easy, although it didn't come quickly, but it sort of came quickly in the sense that it seemed like it was going to happen. And then when it didn't, mid-show, early show, then it felt like, okay, we're not going to get it for another week or two. And then we got it by the end, which is, and they, fully addressed, well, I should say fully, they didn't explicitly, but the meeting that Sami had with Solo felt relevant. It didn't feel like some quick little misdirection. It was integral. As Cole said, Sami has rejected the invite of Solo to join the new Bloodline. Sami absolutely could have justifiably kicked Roman. And I think fans would have accepted that was Sami's choice based on Roman kind of being a jerk to him, even if it wasn't what Jey wanted. And then in the end, Solo thought he had Sami, and Sami comes out and had a chance to prove he was with him, and he wasn't. I think the emotions that the fans went through, that they put the fans through, I think if you look at the crowd reaction, it really worked. I don't, having it not come easy and then happen at the end of the show is good. And, a lot of these things, it's belaboring the point. I wrote in the middle of my report on PWTorch.com on SmackDown, like I think I did. I think I wrote it, that if Roman resists for too long, fans are going to be like, come on, like we cheered you for months while you were gone. Sami's a good guy. He's, come on, just do the right thing for us. And they didn't make us wait another week and resent Roman for not making that move quickly.
Yeah. And they still have some storyline things to work out. Like Roman can show appreciation to Sami for siding with them because he is a big help. He can still make his apology and not really ruin his character. I think that people would embrace him showing that side of himself. And you still had the introduction at some point, I would think, whoa. I would think that Paul Heyman would be coming in at some point. So you still have that. So there can still be a little bit of tension as we build to the War Games. So yeah, they haven't just told the entire story of them getting back together. There's still a little bit more to go. And to your point, the fans did react. I will say that I'm probably in the vast minority that I'm a little burned out on the Bloodline. It's a lot. I don't. It's just I don't know. It's a tad repetitive to me. I do enjoy the storytelling aspect of it, and it's going to be fun to watch the War Games and everything, but it's a tad monotonous to me.
See, I think it's been a slow build, and people have been craving developments, and then I think they just push down on the gas pedal now. And so to me, like if it felt like it wasn't moving along in a particularly inspiring direction at an inspiring pace, I just think now we got there. Like we're at a really good place. There's still more developments to be had. We're getting multiple people in the chat room asking about, when do you expect to see Paul Heyman back in the Bloodline? A J Machado 82, whoever that is, says when do you expect to see him back? Blake Riley says, will Paul Heyman be back at Survivor Series or before? I'm torn. So we'll throw that in there. What do you think? Even if you're a little burned out on the storyline, there is the Paul Heyman return, and that's the next big card to play. I mean, we've got the full 4 for the new Bloodline, the full 4 now aligned in the OG. I think that they've taken us on a journey that feels true to all the characters involved. And so now we have 4 and 4. We'll get into whether it's going to be 5 on 5. I think that was a red herring to suggest Sammy would be joining them. Roman would have to find 3 extra people. I think my hunch is it'll be 4 and 4, but we can talk about that too. Your thoughts on Heyman in particular, Darrin?
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to see him back before the War Games, because you could play that out in theory. I personally would like to see him come back because number one, the story calls this would be the best opportunity to do it, unless they have something else in mind, of course. And it would add a fresh aspect to unite the team as they head into the big showdown. So I would not be surprised, but you can't wait too late because you only had 3 weeks to do it. So it seemed like they would at least throw you some kind of hint he was coming back. So I would, if I had to guess, I'd probably say the week after next, maybe he would come back.
I'm super open to this. I don't do this a ton, but when it comes to storyline, I don't like to come down too hard negatively before things play out. So my point is and not that you're being critical, but like I'm open to Paul Heyman coming back soon. I'm open to him not coming back till like February. Like I think this is their pride and joy. I mean, this storyline, this story arc, and if he doesn't come back, if he comes back in the next week or 3 or at Survivor Series itself, that's the story they want to tell, and I think they'll tell it well, and there'll be a good reason for it. They might wait longer. They might think we've played enough of our hand, and War Games is enough. We don't need, whose side is he on? Paul Heyman coming out, or why does Heyman resent that Roman never called him back after WrestleMania and ghosted him, and has he been secretly, is he the guy who brought in Jacob Fatu or whatever? I mean, you could do that, but you could also not. I mean, 4 and 4 is enough. You don't need Paul Heyman at this stage. And if you hold that card for later, I mean, it's nice to have that to play it later, I mean, so I think they can get by not playing it, I guess is my thing. But I mean, I think the over under is Survivor Series. So we'll
probably, and he could come right at the show to help them swing the advantage. Yeah. Also, afterwards, you have to have somewhere to go. So him teaming up with the new Bloodline, which is not off the table, because Solo does need a little something behind him still. That side is a little bit lacking in the credibility department against the old Bloodline to me again. So if you were to put Paul with them, I think that would help bolster their credibility a bit.
All right, let's pause, introduce ourselves, and then move on with more conversation about the Bloodline stuff. We got some chat room comments. We got people in the waiting room as callers. We'll check the email, the mailbag also, and a lot more developments on the show. Even some undercard stuff I thought was well done. This was a newsworthy episode of SmackDown. I think is newsworthy in terms of, I mean, not just the U.S. women's title being introduced, which we'll talk about. Candice LeRae suddenly feels relevant. They're playing up Bayley, not seeming inspired, but actually using that as fuel to give us a reason to care about her. We have Tommaso Ciampa suddenly seeming relevant and inspired and interesting for the first time on the main roster. The Machine Guns, I think, are being used. Montez Ford showing both extremes of what I like and don't like about him, yelling at the top of his lungs for no reason at the beginning of the backstage segment, and then getting serious and talking softly, which I'd love to see a lot more of. A lot to say about this show. I didn't even hit everything. This is a Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, November 8th, 2024. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter, dating back more than 3 decades, and also PWTorch.com. That's our main website. That's where my live TV coverage is, and pay-per-view and PLE coverage, along with a lot of other features. Just good writing, good analysis from a wide array of perspectives every day at PWTorch.com. So when you're tired of the clickbait headlines and the whatever, all the breaking news that everybody has, pay a visit to PWTorch and settle in and read some good analysis from a really smart group of contributors. One of those contributors is our Impact TV reporter and frequent podcast co-host, and he hosts his own VIP show covering TNA Impact Wrestling, Darrin Lilly. Darrin, welcome back. Usually, but not always, you're covering Raw with me. It's fun to have you on a Friday night.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
I'm good to have you. If people want to participate in the show, I mentioned a variety of ways here, but one is by email. WadeKellerPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to do more than, put something in the chat room and maybe we miss it, maybe you want to say something at a little more length, that is a good way to do it. Try to get it into us early during the show, so when we're running long, we don't feel guilty not getting to it. And you can also join us in the chat room during the show live. If you're going to watch our live stream here on YouTube, we're at youtube.com/PWTorch. You can always find a link to the show in my TV reports at PWTorch.com. Or if you're a VIP member, PWTorchVIP.com, with a nice, streamlined, ad-free website experience. That also includes, by the way, in my TV reports, a link to be a video caller or audio caller on the show. We enjoy having interactions with our viewers/listeners, and it is a VIP exclusive, Patreon supporter exclusive benefit. And so take advantage of it if you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter. And as always, check out my TV reports at PWTorch.com, covering the shows. And then if you go VIP, you can hear me cover the show start to finish in detail on the Wade Keller hotline. It is a VIP exclusive feature. I record it right after these post shows, but when you download your podcast in the morning, you can listen to the Wade Keller hotline first in 15 minutes, give or take. Get a quick rundown of the show start to finish with my thoughts on it, so you're caught up if you didn't see the show, which then makes the post show make more sense, so you know what we're actually talking about. Or you can read my report on the website too. That's another way to go about it. So let's I feel like I covered what we need to cover there, so let's get to some more analysis here, and we'll get to our callers who are lined up also. Darrin, in the chat, the number of people talking about the 5-on-5 aspect. I mentioned that in Block A at the beginning here. Jason D says another key moment is they pretty much said it'll be 5-on-5. As Solo said, Roman, you have to find 4 other people. I want to reiterate, I don't know for sure, but I think, Jason and Darrin, that was simply to create a believable scenario that Sammy was joining them. And as soon as Sammy turned, I think it's going to be 4-on-4. I don't think in the next few weeks they have time to make sense of a 5th person joining each team. Am I missing? I mean, yes, you can add Kevin Owens on one side and Randy on the other. You can add Cody Rhodes and what? I mean, but do they need that? To me, it just 4-on-4 makes sense right now.
Right. I think that would dilute it. And the thing that people want to see is the 4 against 4, those core people. So yeah, adding some Orton or Owens, I don't think is a good idea. And I think that the reason he said 5-on-5 tonight was just to introduce the Sami Zayn aspect of it. I don't expect to go 5-on-5, and I think that would be a mistake to introduce probably a new character. And I don't think they have enough time to just establish who that might be also, if they were to bring somebody in from the outside.
BJF said in the chat, hey, Al, terrible week, but great Smackdown this week. Blake Riley says, brilliant storytelling with the Bloodline throughout the night. Love this stuff. Me and my son were literally cheering the moment at the end. Mark Pischetti says, I liked the feel-good story, but I was ready for that heel turn. I talked myself into it after he caused the beatdown. And Mike Good2 says, knew where it was going, but they had me for a moment. So did they have you, Darrin, for a moment? Did you think Sammy's going to come in and kick Roman's face? He deserves it. Roman wasn't as gracious as he should have been. Sammy's had enough. He opened up his heart. He forgave a lot of bad treatment, and Roman rejected it. Did you think, hey, maybe they're going to tell the story? And then, because, I mean, you can, in 3 seconds in your head, like, fast forward to War Games and think, oh, my God, yes, I could imagine Sammy. It's a 5-on-5. Sammy's on the original War Games side, or the new War Games, the new Bloodline side in War Games, and something happens where it goes too far and Sammy helps the OG Bloodline win or something like that. I don't know. Like, I could imagine them taking that approach, and then Roman's got to find, 2 people to join him and Jimmy and Jay. So, did they have you at all, or are you like, it's a fun story, but I know where this is heading pretty quickly here?
At the point where Solo said you need to get 4 partners, I did raise a few questions, but then when Solo held up the thumb and invited Sammy in, you could see where it was going at that point. But they absolutely did have me for a few seconds where I was like, maybe this is headed towards Sammy turning, since his partner Kevin Owens just did it. They could still be aligned and everything, so that would kind of make sense. But when he started coming towards the ring, I was like, okay, we can see it coming. So it was short-lived, but yes, they did get me.
How many, Ken Arnold says in the chat, how many people thought the 5th member of Solo's group would be Rock and Cody joining Roman's side, if only for a few seconds? I mean, that would be the logical way to fill it out had Sammy turned. For some reason, I just didn't expect Rock to come back for this.
I didn't think him. I was thinking maybe Hikuleo. Is that how you pronounce his name? Maybe he was coming in.
Yeah. David Hager says, I think adding Cody and Rock would be too rushed. I think Rock doesn't want to be one of 10 people in a ring. Yeah. I mean, honestly, and I don't know that he wants to even be in a War Games. So, yeah. Adam Kidd just says, I really like the close to the show. Did you like the pacing of the Usos raising their fingers, Sammy noticing, looking at Roman, Sammy raises his finger, dramatic pause? Because, I mean, you could imagine Roman lowering his head and leaving the ring, turning his back, and this gets pushed on to another week or two. But instead, he raised his arm up, and the crowd popped. What'd you think of that in terms of the way that they got to that point?
Yeah, I thought that was details that they do very well. That was in the original Bloodline thing, the little nuances that they just pull off very well, and this was no exception. Some of the stuff had gone away during like Jey Uso's solo run, where he was so good at that kind of stuff, but now I'm glad to see that that's being introduced back, those little touches, so that is a positive sign.
Yep. All right, very good. Let's introduce our first caller. We got a lot more to cover on the show. We'll let the callers lead the way for a little bit here. We'll start with Dan, who is an audio caller. Dan, welcome. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind about SmackDown tonight?
I just wanted to talk about Randy Orton and Kevin Owens.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a good storytelling, but it went on too long when they stretchered him out of the arena. I was just like, come on, there could be a lot more time for other wrestlers to perform or have their story told. I don't know. What do you guys think?
It was heavy, Darrin. I mean, that's about as heavy as they get selling an injury to a wrestler. Randy really played it up. I don't believe that every moment of a wrestling show needs to be a bunch of high spots and in-ring action. And I think you want to slow down and sell something, reinforce it after the break with a replay and some commentary. If everything just feels like we just think our audience has zero attention span and we need to just feed them constant dopamine rush action, nothing really lands. And you're not thinking about anything afterwards. There was a lot on this show. If they didn't play up the Randy Orton injury the way that they did, I don't know that it would be something even Dan is talking about, ironically, since Dan didn't like the length of time they gave to it. I'm patient enough. I just don't need every second of my life filled with something new. I'm okay with really showing the drama of Randy selling this pile driver with the announcer saying that's why it was banned. And Randy obviously has been through a lot of surgeries. And but it was a choice they made because that was heavy. I could imagine some people at home. I mean, I think people who watch and listen to podcasts like this think, "Oh, come on, Wade. Nobody thinks it's real. You're totally not. Who would buy that?" I think there's people sitting at home who tune into SmackDown and they watch and they're like, something just bad happened to Randy. They wanted to tell that story tonight. Darrin?
I would say he gave him a pile driver, and I'm not really sure fans bought it as that devastating. I didn't realize they had banned it from WWE TV, but okay. In other leagues, you see it used pretty regularly, and I didn't think that was as devastating as they made it out to be. I get they sold it very well for the purposes.
It's as devastating as you sell it.
That is absolutely
Sometimes,
true, and that's how they made it very dramatic.
Think of John Cena's finisher, Darrin. It's like what a fireman would do to an old lady if he rescued her from a building and wanted to set her lightly on the lawn outside in safety.
Well,
like it's a fireman's carry where you just sort of drop someone gently down. I mean, if an old lady with a back issue would be fine if the FU was given to her, or what do they call it? What they change? Attitude adjustment.
Right. That's what it was.
Yeah. So but you sell it in pro wrestling. If you sell it consistently, then it's official. It hurts. The pile driver. It was weird because obviously. Oh, good, Darrin.
People didn't buy that either, though.
Well, the pile driver did not land. Orton's head didn't hit the mat. But it almost came across like, again, I don't want to do the heavy lifting for doing this, but like the selling was so consistent and convincing. It's almost like something went wrong in the way that Orton's head landed on on Kevin Owens' leg, and something went wrong. I don't know. I mean, my thing is, if you're gonna do it. Like, make it count. And I would much rather have an attack with a pile driver lead to that angle than burning someone's house down, threatening them with a screwdriver, or putting a plastic bag over their head. This is a way to take something that believably happens in the playing field of pro wrestling traditionally, and it feels believable. It doesn't feel like a hot shot. It feels like we're going to get the most out of a move that now we're going to remind people has been banned for a long time.
Yeah, well, they did certainly milk it. I mean, no one can accuse them of not doing that. So they went all the way with it. But yeah, again, I mean, a little skeptical that it was really that effective, just to me. But I'm very angry this week. So
I know. I noticed, Darrin. I did not blame you. That's a whole other topic.
So maybe that's clouding my judgment.
Yeah. Oh, understand. I mean, it's been. Anyway, Azan says a pile driver career ending. And Azan White says it's broken Austin's neck. Ken Arnold in the chat says that KO pile driver and Randy was well executed. I don't know about that. It was great selling by all parties. I do agree with that. Even heel commentator Corey Graves was disgusted. Adam Kidd said it was a very safe pile driver, but it can be career ending. And Brock Benningfield says banned move. I love it. No holds barred match. Pile driver is legal for one match. Oh, interesting. And I don't mind them milking it because they reminded people it's a banned move. And then there was Lady B says, I also loved Corey Graves. Outraged. Why are we showing the replay? Good work on his part in the moment. So we'll go back to Dan. I mean, Dan, it's fine if you thought they believed the point, but my God, if you want an angle to land, you got to spend some time on it. And I don't believe in.
I mean, it was needed. I don't disagree with that, but it was just like, oh man, this is like going on for however long it did. I don't know, but by the way, on the
it went on. I mean, WWE does that. That's they do that, and people get mad. But they know they're doing it. They don't want it. They want things to last a little longer than you expect because that's their way of emotionally convincing you that this should be seen as a big deal, not just business as usual. When they stay with something and go back to it, it's their way of underlining and emphasizing and bolding the text of this plot point. And if you can't deal with 30 seconds longer than you want for something, settle down. Just seriously, this isn't you, Dan. I mean, I don't, it sounds like I'm being personal. This is to everybody. This is to everybody out there. Like, settle down about this expectation that every single second of a 2-hour wrestling show needs to be feeding you some dopamine rush. It doesn't. Just settle back and relax and watch it play out. And this is like, it's more aimed at Tony Khan than anybody. Like Tony's, and like just in general over the last 5 years. Like stop just shoving food in people's mouths constantly, because it's like how I am with like eating popcorn sometimes. It's like people look at me and go, slow down. It's like, but the salt and fat went away in a half a second. I need more. And I don't need that in my wrestling. I don't think they should. I don't think WWE or pro wrestling promotion should cater to wrestling fans like my hands do when I have a tub of popcorn. I like the pacing. So anyway,
I had no idea.
I'm venting in my own way, Darrin. I'm dealing with my. I have serious issues with popcorn. However, whatever serving I'm given during a movie, and this is not like after a gummy or anything, no matter what, it's just like, devour however much there is and then regret it later.
Hard
anyway.
to hear this.
Azan says slow is slow. Nope. Grow up. All right, Dan, back to you.
The other topic I wanted to bring up was Solo talking about how he was already the tribal chief. Why do I need to fight you for it? I was like, okay, cool. Actually had some logic to it.
Yeah. That was a good line.
Yep. Yeah. Darrin, what'd you think of Solo tonight? Because it seems like he's trying to be less, dare I say, boring.
Yes.
Like he's letting loose a little bit with his personality, and it's risky because he's been so stoic. He was stoic when he was in the background. He's sort of been almost like in an intense trance, and now he's kind of, there's more body there's more body movement, there's a little more accent, like he's just letting it flow a little bit more. Your thoughts on that?
It was a good point that Dan brought up. I thought that he showed a little more range tonight, including just hitting that line picture perfect. And that range is going to help him become more credible, because it was like he was almost mocking Roman during that. And so I thought his character, kind of stood up to him and kind of grew a bit and fleshed out some of the just, I'm the serious guy. I am the tribal chief. And that added some personality. And I like that. And that's the stuff he's going to have to continue to do to grow as a character, to become more credible. Because, Roman, that is a tough person to match for like the last 4 years. He's just been the guy. And if anyone is going to have trouble trying to match his energy. But and as I alluded to earlier, I think he's just coming up a little bit short in the credibility department. But stuff like that is going to help when he's out there just outright mocking him like that. I thought that helped him a lot.
It's a classic heel move.
Yeah. A couple of people commenting on Solo. Azan White says, Solo felt off tonight. Solo trying humor tonight. Darrell Freeman says Solo has found his voice and style to things. He's becoming more of a top guy in his own way. And Adam Kidd said, I think Solo has improved a ton in the last month. But then Mark Pischetti says Solo has zero top guy energy. and I actually think that's why they are trying to have Solo expand a little bit, loosen up a little bit, because I think there is an acknowledgement, no pun intended at all, that maybe he's not interesting enough, and he's also not convincing enough. Some people can get away with saying very little and doing very little, but they just radiate this X factor. Solo just doesn't have that. He's not pitiful in that regard. It's just like 4, 5, 6, out of 10, any given week. Sometimes a 4, sometimes a 6. I think they're experimenting a little bit, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Del J says the big problem with Solo is why was he quiet for so long? So we'll see. All right, Dan, back to you. Anything else you want to comment on that, or anything else?
Yeah, that was it. You guys have a good night.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, let's go to Junaid next. Junaid, welcome. Good to hear from you.
Hi, Wade. Hi, Darrin. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind about SmackDown?
First of all, do you agree with Sammy when he says the opposite of love is actually indifference, not hate?
I've heard that before, and I think there's something to that. It's semantics. It's it's subjective, not objective. But I think in pro wrestling, and sometimes in life, love and hate are intense emotions, and I think the argument is two intense emotions can be the opposite of each other in terms of intense emotions, but an intense emotion, maybe a better opposite, is a complete lack of emotion. And so I think that's what he's getting at, is you're a lot close. Well, if you hate someone, you're closer to loving them than if you're completely indifferent to them. And there might be something to that. I mean, a lot of marriages have both love and hate. And their love is more intense if there's hate. And when there's indifference, I think therapists will say when there's indifference, that's actually closer to the end than when there's hate. Because at least there's still a burning emotion there. So I think that's what Sam is getting at, to get all, philosophical and on that. Junaid, you asked that. What do you think?
I've always thought hate was the more obvious opposite option, but I suppose when Sam said it,
that's why he said it, because that's why he said it. It felt surprising to say something that felt unconventional, but I think there's a point there.
Overall, I thought the segment was amazing. I thought the way they framed it, the way they shot it, with Jimmy and Roman on one side of the ring, and Jay and Sammy on the other side of the ring, more clustered together. I thought that was amazing, and the exchange with Sammy and Roman is amazing. His facial expressions of Roman was great as well. As great as I think Sam made some great points about enjoying their past history in the Bloodline together, and how Roman wants to get back to that secretly, but he's not really sharing it in his body language. What do you think of that part of it? The body language in the segment.
Yeah, Darren. Obviously, you can listen to Bloodline segments on SmackDown, and then you can turn in but not watch, and then you can watch and hit mute. And it's interesting. I mean, you can hear there's two completely, they're aligned, but there's a whole set of worthy observations to make about body language with the person who's not talking. And I talked about like the backstage segments with the Bloodline in kind of the prime of SmackDown on Fox. You could watch, if there are 5 people in a Bloodline segment, you should watch the segment 5 times and just stare at each person for each viewing, because there's not a wasted second. They all know their role. They all were reacting or not reacting in a certain way that was intended to be telling.
Yeah, we kind of alluded to that earlier. That is the stuff that they do very well. And even as was just mentioned, even the camera angles and showing the 2 different sides of the wrestlers on both sides, that really adds to the drama of it. So they're hitting a mark on those little nuances where you could probably go back and watch and catch different things. So yeah, good point.
Junaid.
I thought the final segment was very newsworthy, was amazing as well. But I personally do not believe that Sami Zayn was going to turn the original Bloodline. What did you think of? Did you believe him at that moment, or not?
We covered that in earlier in the show, Junaid. I imagined the possibility. I don't think that means I believed it would happen, but sometimes there's convincing near falls, and you're like, I don't think this will be the end, but what if it is? And you have that like just 2 seconds to kind of imagine, oh, if this is a finish, what does that mean? And all these thoughts kind of go through your head. So there was sort of, I guess, that moment. I wasn't ruling it out, but I mean, come on, it's Solo holding up Roman for a haluva kick. It's pro wrestling. It's going to be misdirected, and it's the misdirection is going to end with a pop. That was the top choice, but I mean, there was enough doubt there because Roman rejected Sammy's overture, and he's been stubborn, and it makes Darren. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and it excuse me, also plants the seed for what could potentially happen in the actual War Games match if Sammy were to join the other side. You can recount all of this stuff and have this footage like, oh, yep, there was that moment where, with planting the seed, it's not coming out of nowhere if they do decide to go that route. So it does cause some, dissension, possibly.
Junaid, anything else you want to add?
Do you think after this War Games match that Jay and Sammy will go the separate ways with the rest of the Bloodline? Do you think they'll continue this group?
Good question. What do you think, Darren? Is this, because, I mean, I honestly haven't thought much past it. So Junaid is bringing up something I haven't thought too much about, which is if they unite, is it for one night? Do they all go their separate ways? Afterwards, if something is proven, they close the book on it and we move on to a new chapter. I could see that. Yeah. Darren, what do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised if they held on at least for one more show to have the Usos have a tag team match. And then after that, they go their separate ways, because I think there's too much upside in Jey Uso as a solo act. And sure, you can do the reunion, the tag team here and there. There's no reason they have to have just a split forever. You can still go back to that, but I think there's just too much upside to Jey as a solo. He gets one of the biggest reactions in the whole league, and we just kind of mentioned a while back that them teaming up would eventually just bring Jey down. So I don't think they want to run into that and cool him off. So yeah, I can see it go another month or so, but then they'll go their separate ways. I don't know what's going to happen to Jimmy necessarily. I don't know if things bode well, but that's not their biggest concern, I'm sure.
Yeah. Junaid, anything else for us?
Two more points on this story, and then I want to move on to Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. Firstly, how do you think Paul Heyman gets reintegrated into the story? Because it's odd that Roman Reigns doesn't really talk about him at all, really. He mentioned the wise man a couple times in previous weeks, but he didn't bring him up tonight unless I've missed something. So how do you think he comes back to the fold?
We touched another topic we covered earlier in the show, but we didn't actually explore a specific. Like if Heyman comes back at Survivor Series, Darren, have you thought through, or do you have in your mind one or two most likely scenarios for what his return entails?
I think when they're on the verge of maybe having some more dissension as they talk things out, maybe some little flare-ups happen, and he's the guy that kind of resolves everything. That's when he comes in. So that would be a logical role if they're going to do it on the road to the War Games. After that, they could, who knows, but that would probably be the most logical way to reintroduce him.
Maybe Saturday Night's Main Event. Derek Mitchell in chat says, I still say Saturday Night's Main Event in December will have a big storyline on the show. Could be the return of Heyman. It might be straightforward, I mean, it won't be straightforward. I mean, it might be, but it won't be. Like, there's going to be something big about Heyman's return, and I don't want it to be a forced misdirection where it's like, oh, Heyman's with Solo. No, he's not. Or he's with Heyman, but no, then he hits, he distracts Roman and gives him a sinister. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. I mean, they have that lingering out there, Darren, that Heyman, Roman, ghosted Heyman, and they can tell a story. I don't think there's anything contradicting it, where Heyman resents Roman. They hugged, and it was this big deal. And then the story is Roman ghosted him, and then he wasn't, and I mean, I don't want to hear, oh, you didn't call me enough when I was in the hospital. Like, that's, everybody says that. It's kind of a, go-to thing for pro wrestling. I hope we don't get that. I think Paul Heyman's above that. I'm confident he is, but I mean, I'm not ruling out Heyman comes back and it is a misdirection. And he ends up, giving the new bloodline what some people think they need, which is someone better than Solo. Although we heard from Jacob Fatu tonight, which we can talk about. So yeah, Junaid, back to you. We'll cover a couple of those things I just brought up later too.
Do you think that after the closing segment, Roman cares as much about being the tribal chief anymore following this week, or do you think he still has a underlying part of the story that he wants to be the tribal chief, the only tribal chief after this story?
Darren, does Roman Reigns need to? Maybe the question isn't does Roman care about being tribal chief as much as does Roman believe he's just is, like that it's ridiculous that anyone else would think they were. So it's not he wants it or doesn't want it. He wants it less than he used to or more than he used to, or it's logical or illogical. It's just, he just believes he is. Like, that could be it. Like, I mean, it's just a given. It's like, if, like as a kid, before you understand gravity, you just think if you let go of something, of course it falls. And then you learn that's not the case. If you go into space, things just don't move. Like, it takes gravity for something to drop. Maybe that's the case with Reigns. He just thinks, of course I'm the tribal chief. Look at me. Who am I? What have I done? Solo, what have you done? Of course I'm the top of the family. You have no right to make your case. You can't make a credible case. It might not be that he wants it. It's just he feels he is. Darrin.
That was certainly the attitude tonight because they're still, and I don't think we've heard the last of that. There's a lot of storylines still left to tell. For eventually, that's how he's going to end his story, is getting the necklace back and everything, and maybe Solo acknowledging him, or at least him getting a definitive win at the very least. So yeah, we haven't heard the last of that, and that will definitely still be a goal of his, I think.
Yeah. Brock Benningfield says, I smell a twist with Heyman. I don't know why. And Ken Arnold says, WWE Creative's making sure to drive home the point that the OG Bloodline are individuals and will go their own way, but I think they'll leave the door open for them to get together when necessary. So yeah, they can do their own thing, but they're on standby to look out for each other too.
Yeah.
Junaid.
His final topic, the Kevin Owens Randy Orton pile driver angle. Owens sending Randy Orton into the hospital. That angle, I'm often emotionally invested to this degree, but I was honestly on the verge of tears. As much as that may be hard to believe, because we know about all the backstage stuff, and showing the emotions of Owens, Orton, Cody coming to Orton's aid. I thought it was amazingly well done, and I have them keeping the camera on Randy Orton during the duration of this, and I was all in on the moment, and hope Randy makes a full recovery as a character. And even though I saw a predetermined performance, I think getting emotional resonance is a key in wrestling, and it's one of the reasons I watch wrestling in the first place. And I thought the commentator's reaction was very reasonable and relatable as well. Talking about the band move and how it's a terrible thing Kevin Owens has done, and the regret in Kevin Owens' face was great as well. Even though he was a bit of a coward walking away, not coming to Randy Orton's aid. So I think all of that was masterful storytelling, and deeply invested in this, and look forward to what happens next.
Yeah, I'm good endorsement of the angle. That's what WWE wants to hear that kind of review of what they did. Junaid, what else?
Thank you, and have a good night.
Awesome, thanks. Yep, good to hear from you. All right, let's bring Jason D from Australia into the conversation next. Jason, welcome. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
No problem, Wade. Good to speak to you too, Darrin. With the opening segment, I was borderline. Look, normally when I call up, I pretty much like everything. I look for the positives, but the first segment with Sammy, I was borderline not liking it because I thought, to me, Sammy's character, it's almost like he's too embracing of the nostalgia with the bloodline, and that's sort of overriding his bitterness and the actual bad things that happened to him that Roman did. Like the whole positioning of Jay wanting Sammy to come out there and explain to Roman his actions. In my mind, I'm thinking Sammy doesn't have to explain his actions. And I thought Sammy was missing a key line when he said to Roman, I didn't mean to kick you. But having said that, I haven't lost any sleep over it. Like I wanted him to say something like that.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
do you know what I'm saying here, Wade? It's almost like but I can tell where they're going with the story, but for Sammy, almost too. But then I say to myself, listen, how many of us in family, you might have a feud with a family member, and you're prepared to let all the bad things go away because you cling on to the nostalgia, you cling on to the good times. So I can reconcile with that in my mind. But at the time, I thought he was a little bit too soft with, he doesn't owe Roman anything. And he doesn't even know an explanation. And it's very interesting what they're doing with the Roman character. And I feel like there's a lot of scar tissue with the Roman character because the writers, they're so, and Triple H, they're so protective of making sure that we don't make Roman too soft because we don't want to lose what he has with his character that people have embraced. So they don't want him apologizing or doing too much to make him seem soft. So they're trying to thread the needle there, if you can see what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely choosing a specific direction with Roman, and it wasn't the reaction fans were hoping for when they were chanting OTC before he returned, and then he returned, and they wanted it to be this glorious celebration of Roman, we're cheering you now, love us back. And Roman's preoccupied with his own. He and Raven could share some stories about angst and sitting in corners and sitting backstage contemplating life and their decisions and how other people don't see things their way and how much that bothers them. That was a deliberate choice they made. And I mean, it's risky because Roman could come back and in one promo, just, just kind of flipped the switch and said to fans, I'm a new man and suffer and succotash, cheer me and love me. But they took a very different approach with him, and not everybody agreed with it. He just seemed sort of, sullen and uninspiring and disappointing and like, get over it already. But that's the choice they made. And it culminated, tonight was a bit of a culmination of it. I mean, raising that arm after everything that they did was him just going, okay. And part of it is getting beat up 4-on-1 and realizing you need help. And Sami could have sided with Solo. And I think we're supposed to believe that Roman thinks, even in his heart, Roman would have blamed Sami for siding with Solo, the way he treated him. But in the end, Sami didn't. And that was a loyalty test that Roman didn't orchestrate, but he observed. And it said, you know what, this guy does have my back despite how I've treated him and despite the temptation to turn on me. He's got my back. So I am reluctantly going to try to embrace this, but for the moment, we'll stand in solidarity. We got a War Games to fight. Darrin, anything you want to add to that?
I know it's a different approach that they tried when he came back, and it seems to be working. Eventually, they're going to have to come out of that, and I think it's going to lead to him maybe showing some regrets and I think the fans will be very receptive to that once we get to that point. But we're not quite there just yet. But when they do, I think that he can kind of come back to normal and stop brooding so much and that type of thing. And I think that'll be very welcome by the fans.
Yeah. All right, Jason, back to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I look back at the past 2 War Games, and both the men's were 5-on-5. So I do believe this will be 5-on-5. I don't think that was a red herring. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago, and look, I'm only trying to follow the breadcrumbs they lay out. If this was under a Vince McMahon era, I wouldn't be following it this much or paying attention to what they're doing. But I seem like Triple H, Paul Levesque, the writing team, they have things happen on purpose leading up to things, okay? So if it is going to be 5-on-5, and I'm just trying to read the breadcrumbs they're laying out, if they go down that path, I don't know who Solo would have on his team, maybe another family member, but I could see the Bloodline and even Paul Heyman coming back and recruiting Bron Breakker. The reason for Bron Breakker is that Bron has defeated Sami and Jey Uso for the IC titles, so they would respect him. And of all the people that would be a Paul Heyman guy would be Bron Breakker, so you have the connection there. And they did tease that confrontation with Brian and Jacob a few weeks ago. So I don't think it's a slip of the tongue. I think it will be 5-on-5. I know Bron Breakker is not part of the Bloodline, but he is Bloodline in wrestling sense. So that's a prediction I'm making based on the breadcrumbs they've laid out. Now, I could be wrong.
I can't rule it out, Jason. I think, I won't rule it out, but I'm not thinking that's the most likely scenario. I think there's going to be more story to tell with Heyman with some part of the Bloodline for a while. But I think post WrestleMania next year, we're looking at something like that. And I think the reasons you gave will be some of the foundation for when that happens. And I think that'll be really fun. I mean, Roman is not full-time and Heyman is. Heyman's available to be full-time. I think he is. I don't know how many of these shows he's attending and contributing to behind the scenes, but there are times I've heard he's at TV, but not on TV. Roman just, he doesn't want a busy flying schedule anymore, and more power to him. Heyman could certainly afford to, and just wants to be part of wrestling. He's told people he's just getting started. Like he's not winding down like some people his age. So to me, Heyman Bron Breakker alliance is exciting because it's a whole new chapter for him. It's different than Lesnar. It's different than CM Punk. It's obviously different than Bloodline. All the stuff he's done, it feels fresh, and it's his way to link up with somebody who I think would be a good fit for him. So I do like that. I was going to say something else about what you said. Oh, one other thing, Jason, so I don't forget. You called it a red herring or something else, the idea of the 5-on-5. I don't think the way you described it is what I'm saying it is. I think it was meant to create a believable scenario in the moment that Sami would join the new Bloodline, because they don't need 5 people if it's 4-on-4. they need a fifth person if it's 5-on-5. So ever so briefly, for something that had not yet to be defined, Solo created the framework where it'd be believable that Sammy would join them, and Roman would have to go find The Rock and Cody or whomever. But I don't think we should look at that as, well, they want us to be thinking it's still 5-on-5, or as a red herring for the sake of deception. It simply was it was a moment that was needed to sell the notion of Sammy turning. And now that he hasn't, it's not important. It was just because the match isn't made. Solo was issuing the challenge 5-on-5. Well, now he's only got 4, so now it'll be 4-on-4 because no one has officially declared it either. That was just Solo throwing it out there. So anyway, Darrin, your thoughts on either of those points?
Yeah, we kind of alluded to that earlier. I agree with that it's just going to be 4-on-4. I'm intrigued by Jason's scenario bringing in Braun Breaker, but my only thought against that is that it just kind of dilutes the Bloodline against Bloodline. People just want to see the core members, like I kind of said before, and that kind of dilutes it, not the Bloodline and Braun Breaker. That's kind of dilutes the issue a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Wade, I understand exactly what you were saying. I agree. The only reason I said it is that the past 2 events have been with the men, at least 5-on-5, and I'm not saying I agree with the idea because I'd like to see 4-on-4. I'm just saying if they go down that path, they've laid out the foundation. And just in relation, I wasn't saying Braun Breaker would be a Paul Heyman guy right now, but I could see Paul Heyman recruiting him for this specific event. Then you go back to it later. Because I believe Triple H, the way he does things is he teases something, gives it to you a little bit, and then it plays out later on. So, but either way, like I said, I'm intrigued by it, and I'm just intrigued by how they're presenting Roman's characters, that he hasn't really changed. It's just, he hasn't really changed at all. It's just the other characters are almost being more forgiving of him without even him apologizing. But I like the fact that Jay's laying down the record that if you're going to act like this, I'm out. So I like the fact that Jay is consistent with that. And as you guys mentioned, they all seem to have their own separate characters, so they'll all go their own ways. But I guess, like I said, the way that I can pull myself into it is that they are a family, and family will always draw upon those positive emotional bonds they have, the nostalgia, and that will always override the negative for the most part. Another thing I wanted to bring up, look, I really enjoyed the Randy Orton, Kevin Owens angle with the pole driver. I love when a band move is used and then they play up on it, because they're the masters of their own universe. So if they want to make us believe that a pole driver is devastating, and it does look devastating, then go all the way with it. Like you said, Wade. I mean, they have us believing going through a table is devastating. I would rather go through a table than actually take a bump in the ring, to be honest with you, because that looks like a softer landing.
Exactly.
But because of the impact and
Good
the way
example.
it plays out, they're the masters of their own universe. So if you're going to run with it, run with it. And if Triple H is going to say that Kevin Owens is a more dangerous person, and I've seen something in his eyes that I haven't seen before, might as well go all the way with it. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Wade, Darrin, not sure if you saw this report, but it was reported by, I believe, PW Insider that SmackDown and Raw will be going to 3 hours. So, Wade, have you had any confirmation on that?
No. I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to do it.
Don't put that in the universe.
Sorry? I didn't realize I touched on a touchy issue here.
I'm not. I'll save my thoughts and rant for a different week than this week.
Well, okay,
if that happens.
We'll
I haven't independently confirmed it, so I'm...
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We'll move on. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, with the introduction now of a women's mid-card title, the United States Championship, that's interesting. Do they have enough women talent to justify that? I guess they do. We don't want to get into a situation where there seems to be more titles than competitors on the show, but obviously they'd probably bring up more women. And if they were going to go to the 3 hours, which we're not really meant to touch on, I can understand why they would introduce it, because now you've got the 2 world titles, you've got a United States Championship. You would have to think they would introduce an Intercontinental one, and then you got the tag. So, again, where are we going with this?
Yeah, I mean, Jason, if you throw it, it's relevant to talk about the 3 hour concept with the idea, well, now we need to add more titles. I mean, that makes it relevant to tonight's show and not just a triggering thing on a week full of stress and angst and all that. And yeah, I mean, I don't think having another title in the women's division makes the existing titles feel more important, but it's a storyline crutch that Tony Khan engages in, which is, if we put a title on the line, it makes the match inherently more important. But it's like inflation. I mean, the more money you print, the less valuable the money is. So yeah. Darren, what do you think? Pros and cons of this new women's title?
I'm not sure it's the best time to do that because the women's division is a little bit thin and they have people in the tag team division, which thins it out even more. But with people coming back from injuries, Charlotte, I always hear Alexa Bliss may be coming back, maybe at some point Becky Lynch, and that will deepen the division. You bring up some NXT people. I could kind of see it to give kind of the middle division something to aim for. Perhaps, but even on Raw with Liv Morgan being the world champion, it's not like she just has challengers just lined up and down or anything as that is. So I question the timing of it, but I don't know. Maybe if they're having some increased airtime, I guess it makes sense. But it does beg the question, even that Jason brought up, is there going to be an intercontinental women's title also? Because you have to even out both sides, but maybe this will be a traveling champion going show to show or something like that. That would almost make more sense, but that would be inconsistent with the other titles. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there need to be an equal number of titles for the men and women. I don't think that should be a rule, that it's like disrespectful if there aren't. Having a secondary title to give women who aren't at the level of the world champion something to fight over. I mean, I get the rationale for it. I just think the weight of it. I think the weight of the evidence is more titles make all titles less important, and there has to be a really, really, really good reason for it. But like you said, Jason, if PW Insider's right and Raw and SmackDown go to 3 hours, it gives them a easier little something extra to add relevance to more time given to the women on the shows.
And just quickly, speaking of the tag division, I like this development with Ciampa. I like this character. He's getting upset. He's defeated Pretty Deadly or pretty by himself. He's upset with Johnny Gargano, being too friendly with the Motor City Machine Guns. And then I like the interaction with the Street Profits. And I'm hoping we see something with the Street Profits. They've just been, sort of spinning their wheels for a couple of years now. So let's see where they go with that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. You guys can talk about it and continue on with the show. All right, take it easy.
Cool. Yep. Darren, anything you want to say about that?
I like the Ciampa. It energized him. I wonder if Gargano's going to follow suit or if they're going to feud again. I'm concerned about that. I would hope that they stay together as a team because I thought had wondered if they were going to flounder when they moved over to SmackDown, but I thought they were doing fairly well. They've been in some main events, had a brief run as tag team champions. So maybe this will continue that momentum if they do stay a team. I kind of like to see that, but Ciampa on his own is not bad, especially with him in this character, but he's had stop and start pushes before also. So I'd be concerned about that happening again.
Yeah. I really like Ciampa tonight. I mentioned that early in the show. Yeah, I mean, he's been kind of just blah. Like they were creatively not interested in exploring his character. The mannerisms and little things that Gargano and Ciampa did just didn't feel big time. And I don't know. Now, I mean, I like the Motor City Machine Guns coming in. I think Ciampa kind of flipping out over that. Like, hey, we're the great tag team. And now everyone's talking about them, and they took the and it's whether the Machine Guns won the titles quickly in order to set off Gargano and Ciampa, or if that's just an idea they had after they decided to give the Guns a big push right away and just establish to people. This isn't like the New Age Outlaws getting together from little nostalgia tour. This or the Dudleys getting back. Like we're in the Motor City Machine Gun business. We're going to get right to it. We're not going to have them merge into the speed of traffic and trade wins and losses and then tell some story later in 4 months of them winning a title after they've been defined down. They wanted to find them quickly as there's still a prime for them to be had, and they're rising to the occasion on national TV. And you can imagine it setting off Ciampa the way that it has. So yeah, I like that. Yep. All right, cool. So let's go to an email. This is from John C, who goes, "What a freaking show after the week I've had. This is exactly what I needed. Kevin Owens and Randy Orton was fantastic. Michael Cole was great in this. The Bloodline was so good all night. Everything was good. New women's title was overdue, and I'm here for it." So someone voting for it. Yeah, I mean, I think you can make the best of a situation that almost by definition is diminishing the importance of the other women's titles. And, you know, as people are pointing out in the chat, there's a lot of talent in women's talent in NXT right now. And so this gives, if they, you know, I mean, when Raw and SmackDown, when SmackDown goes 3 hours and Raw is expanding more than 2 hours for sure. You know, it might vary. They do have more TV time to fill, and they've got a lot of women, and they're not going to do rapid fire title changes of what are the equivalent of their world title. They are their world titles in the women's division. So this gives them something else to play with. I mean, you know, that is why they're doing it. And it doesn't, that seems logically the reason. It seems obviously the reason they're doing it when the shows expand. So. Yeah.
I did like one of the comments was that maybe make Bayley that first champion. I think that would be a good starting point. People can have good matches against her. She's very credible. So that idea could give it to an NXT person that's coming up and give them an instant spark also. So a lot of different ways you could go with it.
The Pun says they said it's a title for both shows. Did Nick Aldis say that? I
didn't recall it, but I wasn't paying super attention. So.
Yeah, and Ken Arnold says with the new women's U.S. title, I hope the champion floats between SmackDown and Raw and NXT. I do wonder how many women from NXT will move up to add more depth to the main roster in 2025. I don't think a secondary title should float. I think you should have one world title and then two secondary champions. And if they did that, I would be okay with this new title being added. If they had like a merging of the two women's world titles and they had one world champ floating, but then they had two secondary titles that they treated as really important, I'd be more for that than two separate world champions. But I don't think they're going to do that. But that would be the circumstance where I'd be more okay with it. Yeah. But you mentioned Bayley. I thought they did a great job owning. Bayley's been kind of not great lately. And now Candice LeRae's pointing that out. And this is a good example too. I wrote this in my TV report that this is where where it makes sense to add reality to a storyline. It doesn't feel like they're talking about Bayley looking up to Candice on the indie scene and that there's a background there because there's an inferiority complex that a fake story well told is inferior to a bad story that's real, or a less than ideal story that's real, which I think is a lot of approach bookers have. There's this weird insecurity about the fact that everything is scripted and orchestrated. So the way to really sell tickets is to inject something oftentimes completely inconvenient or needless, but it's real. So now people are going to care. It's like, no, people care about really well-developed characters and good storylines. You get to, as Jason said, you're master of your universe. You get to create what's important and what's not. But talking about the background with these two is good use of reality. And you know, it might be embellished. It might be, you know, narrowed down to something that fits the storyline. I don't know their exact thoughts of Bayley regarding Candice in the indie scene, but it was a good story. And it suddenly Bayley didn't just become relevant, but so did Candice. I think Candice feels like, oh wow, I've got something to care about her now, and her ending up replacing Tiffany with Nia also is, you know, I think they're on the path to that also.
Yeah, and she has a lot to offer, and I'm intrigued about where the storyline's going with her. And I think that's somebody who's been underutilized, and they can get a lot more out of. So, always glad to see that.
Yep. By the way, Nick Pun says Nick did say it's a floating title, and Dan said Michael Cole said too. It's for both shows, so that seems to rule out an Intercontinental Championship women's title on one brand and a U.S. title on the other. So
good.
I don't know. It's weird to have a floating secondary title.
It is.
Yeah, it just feels arbitrary and weird. But I'm going back to Motor City Machine Guns and DIY. It makes DIY relevant. I love Ciampa showing fire. It just, to me, this feels like a tag team feud that 5 or so years ago people would have thought somehow Tony Khan would find a way to make happen, hire the Guns, hire Gargano and Ciampa away from NXT like he did Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly, and this would be like to me, this feud. I mean, I don't think this feud is to spite Tony Khan and AEW, because I think they're so past that. They're so past worrying about that now. But in a way, it is. It's like, how did Paul Levesque end up with these two teams feuding with each other in 2024? Because it can be really good, and I think it's really needed for the Street Profits. Like, we need a spark in the tag team division, and Pretty Deadly, and Austin and Waller are like, they're comedy figures that get time on television. They got Otis and Tozawa. There's like, it's felt kind of light. And I think the Guns and edgy DIY, the Street Profits going, whoa, wait a second, this isn't your division, this is our division. I think there's a spark. This sparks the division in a good way.
Yeah, I think it does. I'm always concerned that the stop and start pushing of the tag team division as well. And don't forget the Viking War Raiders, whatever they're calling them this week.
Yep.
Them also, they could benefit from this as well.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I won't disagree with that. It seems like they're going to be what they're going to be a little bit. They don't feel grounded enough in reality. Like, for some reason, where I think like you can imagine them doing a promo at the Machine Guns going, what are you guys doing here? This is our division. Like, it doesn't, or there is an international background with them, with some of these teams, that you can pull from, but I don't know if in the WWE
foundation.
Yeah. Okay. A couple other, Darrin, anything you want to bring up in particular that I haven't yet, rather than me weaving my way through what we haven't covered?
I don't recall anything that we would have skipped over that
Well, let's give a little more attention to Cargill and Belair against Tiffany and Nia Jax.
Okay. Sure.
And because I thought Belair tonight had a spark in energy, and they mentioned it on commentary. Like, I was like, I like this. Like, I mentioned earlier, I like the soft-spoken, serious Montez Ford at the end of the promo, rather than the yelling for no reason at the top of his lungs like a goof at the beginning. It was just a perfect example of, if I like serious, soft-spoken Ford, do more of that. And then Bianca, like, stop kind of floating like you're going through the motions. You got your mannerisms that you do and your moves, and it just feels so like, almost like just this playing the same video game over and over every week with the same character moves. This felt human. This felt like she was ready to kick ass and really up the volume. So talk on that. She
was very crisp tonight. I did notice that as well. Her punches were looking really good when she was going up against Nia, and she was very intense in her exchanges with Tiffany. I was like, wow, do they have some real life issue or something like that? But she was very impressive in that. And I'm Jade's progress is always an interesting topic. She's in the tag team. I wonder if she has progressed as much as they have wanted. I think she has benefited from being in the tag team and getting to be acclimated to the WWE style. And if they decide to split up the team at some point, I think she will have benefited from that time. And then you could push her further if you wanted to do that. But I think she's doing fine. But I wonder if it has been disappointing from what they were expecting from her.
I mean, we covered a lot on this show. I don't know that that there's a ton of other topics that from tonight. I mean, there was a lot on this show, a lot of elements. I think we did a lot with it. I'll throw a few other chat room comments up there, and then if anybody else in the chat wants to add a topic for us, I'll check. Just more on the 5-on-5, 4-on-4 war games. David Hager says, I think originally I felt 5-on-5 made sense, but now 4-on-4 makes more sense since they didn't add a new solo Bloodline member. The Bloodline developments were solid as usual, and the Kevin Owens, Randy Orton, Cody dynamic has been fun and well done. Randy just looks super motivated with this story. Blake Riley said KO was impressive, hitting that pile driver out of nowhere on Randy. It happened so fast. And Dave Hager says a pile driver band move was a nice old school touch. Yeah, it's not something they've talked about as a thing. So some people are like, what? So yeah, interesting stuff there. Also, just some more feedback on our conversation on Solo. Azan White said Solo felt off tonight. Oh no, I mentioned that earlier. Going back to Solo, do you think what we talked about him expanding? Do you think it's working or not working? Is there anything in particular you've seen him do, loosening up and showing a little more range that you would say, yeah, do more of that? Or is there something where I do less of that? Adam Kidd frames it as Solo's turning into the smartass little brother you just want to smack.
Yeah, I could kind of see that, but I'm not necessarily don't know if that's a money drawing spot to be in. Kind of like a Dominic, where fans do absolutely react if that's main event level act. I thought it was encouraging that one thing we didn't touch on was Fatu, Jacob Fatu actually
thank you.
And I thought he did a really good promo. If they are planning to make him the head of the Bloodline, I thought that was a point for it, because I thought he carried himself well. And if he were to be the centerpiece, if he could continue on that route, I think people would buy it.
I didn't look at Solo trying to be a leader, Jacob Fatu being a leader as much as being a vocal supporter of Solo. And there was all that time that went by where people like, what does Goldberg sound like when he's interviewed? And then he got interviewed and it's like, okay. And that's happened before with, silent people who, even Hook, he was quiet for a while and then he talked and it's like, what's he doing? I thought Fatu's speaking really fit his character. But he is the vocal, enthusiastic supporter of Solo. As loyal as Paul Heyman was to Reigns, it's weird to compare Jacob Fatu and Paul Heyman. They're like opposite people in so many ways, but Heyman's devoted loyalty was amazing to Roman, the way he looked at him. And it's just like, oh yes, everything Roman does. And that's Fatu, but there's this edge of sinister malice and threat that comes along with it that does give a boost to Solo. But if he can if you have someone who can cut promos like that, he doesn't have to stay silent like Solo did all the time when he was standing behind Reigns. He can talk more often.
Yeah.
Adam Kidd said, I thought the best promo of the night was Jacob Fatu.
I think that's cool. Yeah.
Del J says Fatu's promo was the most important thing on the show. I don't know about that. I'd like you to expand on that, but it was noteworthy.
Certainly.
Yeah. Ken Arnold said, I stood up and watched when Jacob Fatu spoke to Roman. He was really good in that brief promo. I'm glad they're taking time with him and letting him speak when the time is right.
It's an important part of it when the time is right. And I think this was an opportune time. But yeah, you don't want him cutting a 20-minute promo every week probably. But when the time is right, sure.
Yeah. Derek Mitchell says, I think Roman's next move after regaining the Ulafalo is becoming tribal chief is to head to the Royal Rumble and get a shot at the title. We talked about, does he care about being tribal chief or not? And, I think he does because he thinks it's just his birthright almost, or he's earned it, whatever. It's his birthright that he's validated that he's earned. But yeah, he also wants the title back, and that's going to be an interesting story if they go that way with Cody. I'm not quite ready we got Survivor Series and Saturday's main event and the Royal Rumble. I'm not quite ready to get to the Rumble predictions and all that. I think there's enough
Netflix debut.
Oh God, yes, exactly. David Hager said, I felt Jay's expression when Sammy said Roman needed to say sorry to Jay seemed old to Jay and went against his new free Jay character. I didn't pick up on that. I probably watched it happen, but I don't recall having a reaction to it. And did that stand out to you like it did to David?
I did not catch that as well. No.
Yeah. Very good. On the chat room side of things, Ken Arnold added to the Jacob Fatu discussion. I don't think WWE Creative will rush Jacob Fatu on the mic. I think they're confident with him, but they don't want to push him hard, even though I'm sure they can. So I'm just looking if there's anything else. Just Brock Bedingfield said promo is awesome. Joseph Herrera says Jacob just feels more natural on the mic. I hope they let him expand it more. The disciple role is great. I look forward to seeing where it goes in time. On the Solo front, Junaid says Solo was an 8 out of 10 tonight, in my humble opinion. I've been saying it's like in the 4 to 6 range. I think he's trying to break out of it with some risk. Could go well, could go poorly. But Junaid gives it a thumbs up.
It's good, and it was pre-taped, so I guess in case they had any concerns, they could always redo it. So that's probably a good idea as well.
Yep. All right, good. Well, let's wrap up there, Darrin. I appreciate your joining me tonight to cover SmackDown, an eventful show, and a good conversation with our callers and chat room and email. Tell people about your coverage of TNA Impact a little bit.
Yeah, I do the live TNA Impact reviews on Thursdays here at the Pro Wrestling Torch. They're headed towards, oh gosh, I forgot. Is it Genesis? I'm not sure what show they're headed towards, but they just finished their biggest show of the year.
We depend on you.
Glory. Yes. Well, memory's not what it used to be. Oh, they just completed their biggest show of the year, Bound for Glory, and Joe Hendry did not win the world title, so they're doing a storyline where he's working his way up from the bottom to get another shot at the champion, Nick Nemeth. So that's what's going on there. They have a new Knockouts champion, Masha Slamovich, as well, who defeated Jordan Grace, who appeared on NXT last week. So maybe that's a sign of things to come, perhaps. And John Laszlo and I also do a VIP podcast covering TNA and TNA Impact. So you might want to check that out as well.
Absolutely. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. And you can become a full VIP member there. You also, if you are a Spotify user, you can search PWTorch VIP in Spotify, and then you can subscribe via Patreon to our VIP podcast lineup. There is a 7-day free trial. You can just go right to patreon.com/PWTorchVIP if you want. For our YouTube people, the graphic is on the screen. So we encourage you to check that out. That'll give you access to all our free shows with the commercial break skipped over. There are different tiers that can elevate you to getting all of our VIP shows, which includes, by the way, 18 years ago, VIP podcast vaults. So that includes whatever we were doing in 2006 this week on our podcast front. So you can relive the rise of John Cena and our pay-per-view roundtables and historical shows and backstage news updates with Wade Keller Hotline. But I don't know, probably put up 6 to 8 of those a week. So you can kind of march through. And then there's, if you're a full VIP member, you get access to on-demand access to our library of podcasts going back to 2003 or in 2004, and then hundreds of retro radio shows from the 1990s. So if you're looking for our style of coverage of pro wrestling, but in the past, if you're a newer fan, there's 35 plus years of it out there, both in a podcast format as a VIP member, plus our back issue library of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, which predates us being on the internet and predates us podcasting. And it was chronicling professional wrestling contemporaneously with not only cover stories and backstage news and editorials and roundtable reviews of pay-per-views and star ratings of pay-per-views, but also Torch Talk interviews, transcripts of some of pro wrestling's biggest names, in sort of an unprecedented, and not sort of, it was an unprecedented series of insider interviews, and you can dive into those in the back issues when you go VIP. So lots of reasons to support us. We appreciate if you do, and you certainly get a lot of bang for your buck. PWTorch.com/GoVIP runs down all the different ways you can sign up through Patreon, through your Apple account on your iPhone, credit card, debit card, PayPal, and through Spotify. Darrin, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.